cool. Welcome! If you are just joining us, it has been one hell of a day so far. This is the All Black Pandas versus Frisky Mayonnaise, and we're going to smear both of them into each other and see what kind of concoction we can get. We may produce something that somewhat resembles a normal panda, but until that moment comes, we're not entirely sure. So once Sporefreak readies up, we will proceed with the slopping. I've got a handful of drop frames, but overall, we should be okay. So, ultimately, this map is duel. This is the Carry Me tournament. We have made it to the round of 8. Now, these are still best of 1 matches, and these will be on duel. Guard10 pumping out a couple of buckies and a Dillo. Don't know what he's going to do with those, but getting moneymakers as well. Sporefreak is trying to capture these outposts. That's okay. That's definitely a meritable goal. Elf looks like he's been practicing with happydeath. happydeath, I'll give you a secret. His way that he ultimately always wins these tournaments is that as soon as he knows who his teammate is, he basically abducts them into a private lobby somewhere and coaches them on how to be good at openers. I mean, it kind of sounds bad, but ultimately what you see is that red team is already significantly ahead of the carbon team. They own at least one more outpost. happydeath trying to abuse those generators as much as he can. Playing the Helix, which is an interesting mech choice. Now, landing against Helix, normally not advisable, but Osprey has a pretty good Q heal ability, able to auto-heal itself back up pretty well. Elf is actually the lowest ranked player in this tournament, so the idea that he's able to immediately build Gemini and ferry those to the front is a little bit uncommon to see. So you know he's been getting some outside help, and that outside help has been 15 minutes of loving attention from happydeath. So happydeath is going to take those tanks and just try and get those to the front. Looks like they're using in-game voice chat, telling each other to get their tanks all together into one big super tanky clump. And then they're going to advance from there. But happydeath is going to try and get a little kinky and come in from the side. But realizing there's way too much carbon on the dance floor, going to push in towards the fort instead, if only to be annoying Elf as well. Leaving but not taking his tank with him, so that's going to be really, really awkward for this one Gemini with those two big, strong Longhorn just beating him down into the dirt. That's a shame. That's a real damn shame. So Elf does have more Gemini to replace him. That's the unfortunate and sad truth for most of these tanks, is that at the end of the day, they are replaceable. It's one reason why they don't get benefits. So, this is a pure tank. They've got a handful of Gemini, a handful of Longhorn, but that's kind of an interesting composition that they're rolling with. There is not a single anti-air unit to be spotted here. And you're going against a player who historically plays Bomber, but Sporefreak, a little bit intimidated by happydeath, gets pushed into playing Osprey, which is interesting. Because generally, Osprey is widely regarded as overpowered, especially in 2v2 games. happydeath dropping a jammer here that is going to conceal these tanks from the radars. Sporefreak does see it anyway. Normally, that jammer gives people a little bit of a late reaction. Now that these are on the minimap, we might expect more of a reaction from Guard10 as well. Seeing the Warthog land here would be infinitely helpful. But because both of these are Ospreys, well, never mind. I was going to say, because both of these are Ospreys, Elf is certainly able to just right-click and keep these tanks from dying, and that would have turned into a long, protracted fight. Unfortunately, Elf has not found the ability to right-click yet, but that's okay. Because everyone hates Osprey for the sole purpose that it is a right-click to win sort of mech. happydeath, trying to make magic happen on the front, has already leapfrogged up with these tanks to get a better position on the carbon units. Carbon does have a lot more long-range support, artillery and buckies. So if red gets a little bit too over-aggressive with no healing units and no anti-air, they may find themselves with too much damage over time. Elf, somehow, some way, actually uses the overheal ability. That actually does require you to hit the function keys. I believe it's F3 for that to actually happen. Now, Elf maybe attempting some micro here. Is he going to pick up the damaged tanks and move them to the back? He is not. So just FYI, it tends to be a good idea that when these front tanks are getting damaged, you can prevent casualties by picking up damaged tanks and playing the tank Tetris and moving them to the rear. Now at this point, the Carbon team has a very wide concave, and the red team would be able to push through that. Keep in mind that the red team has almost all tanks. So these mines are new. If those mines weren't there, red team would just kind of weave around and take down all of those units. But happydeath, always trying to open up a new front, does not appreciate having to play in one tiny aisle, in one tiny narrow choke point. So happydeath with the generator basically making sure that even if he takes some damage, he will auto heal, and it's hard to spot that generator, so people will get a little thrown off by that. So I hear some accusations of Smurf in the Twitch chat. This doesn't look like a Smurf necessarily. This is just Osprey. You just hold right click. That's basically Osprey in a nutshell. It does look like he's found it. Now the air to ground heal is a little bit slow, but it does still function. Looks like Carbon Team, sporefreak trying to get in behind, take one of the corner outposts that has been spotted. happydeath is a little confused. May be about to drop out. No, just yep, happydeath is dead, sadly. Now that is after the first 2 minutes of the game, so that is a disconnect that will count as a loss if Elf is unable to salvage this. But if Bobland just straight up says, happydeath, you're doing too well, it's time to die, well, that's what Bobland says, and I can't really argue with Carbon. It is their game after all. So Elf, will Elf be able to salvage this? He has to go from the carry to the carrier. He does have a bot replacement. Now, since happydeath is a fairly high-ranked player, and this is basically a matchmaking game, I would expect that he's not replaced with Natasha, that he's replaced with a semi-competent bot. So this is not a completely fumbled game. This is something that Elf does still have a firm advantage here. As far as the units, the composition, the overall outpost layout, he's got the middle outpost. There's a completely undefended Carbon outpost right here. So Elf can salvage this. The show must go on. happydeath bot trying to get a little bit of harassment on, but ultimately that one flacker does get the kill. Hopefully happydeath is happy in this unexpected demise. But we'll see. sporefreak is trying to take advantage of this, trying to say, well, Elf's a terrible player, let me just make this happen on my own. But happydeath with amazing hit scan, almost getting him killed. Elf, meanwhile, is trying to mount a defense, but placing his tanks the wrong direction. Their backs were facing the Carbon units, so they took damage twice as quickly and got annihilated. So the red defense is all but gone, unfortunately. sporefreak still acting as Osprey, just trying to keep these tanks alive. They are not putting in fort damage. They are actually on hold position. That means they will be prioritizing units. Elf and happydeath putting down socketed T99s, and they're actually going to do this. They're going to hold, and they may actually push back. sporefreak trying to get some gangsters out. happydeath too good a hit scan, but sporefreak does manage to land and stay alive as well. These bots, they are not to be underestimated. They do not miss. Their firing arcs are directly calculated by your exact server side position. They will not miss you unless it's intentional. Red team unfortunately getting muscled off of that middle outpost. Elf a little bit too distracted with a home base defense. Not to say that that's a bad thing, but that does mean that they are on the back foot now. Elf has not by any means lost this. He can take this back. It is not possible to rejoin in-game. This is a one-game series, sadly. So Bobland interfering, sticking his middle finger straight into the oval orifice of this game and saying no. That's unfortunate. It really sucks when Carbon assassinates our players. But happydeath still going to represent. If anything, that just makes the finals more even. Guard10 also finding that. Elf just straight up saying, you know what? No. Can't make it happen. So Frisky Mayonnaise getting wiped up off the floor, unfortunately. It's a shame.